Picture two men leaving the same office building at 6 p.m. One of them earns almost 3 times what the other one makes. He has the better title, the corner desk, the watch people notice. He gets into a car that's 4 years newer. The other one gets into a car that's a little older, walks a little slower, and doesn't say much on the way to the elevator. Here's the part, doesn't add up. The man earning 3 times more is quietly drowning. Every month, before his paycheck even lands, it's already spoken for. A car payment, a credit card minimum, a subscription he forgot he signed up for, a lifestyle he built to match a salary that looked bigger on paper than it feels in his bank app. The other man, the one earning less, he hasn't checked his balance anxiously in over a year, not because he doesn't care, because he already knows the number, and the number doesn't scare him. Same city, same of living. Almost identical paychecks if you count the difference the wrong way. And somehow, one of them is free, and the other one is trapped. That's not coincidence. That's a system. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how it works. And more importantly, how to end up on the right side of it. Why this isn't really about money. Here's the thing nobody tells you when you're young and broke and promising yourself that once I make more, everything will feel easier. It won't, not automatically. Because financial stability was never really about how much lands in your account. It's about how much of your life you've handed over to things you don't even remember choosing. The car you upgraded because a coworker upgraded first. The apartment that's slightly too expensive because it felt like who you are now. The version of your future self that keeps getting quietly mortgaged to pay for the version of yourself you're pretending to be today. This video isn't about budgeting spreadsheets, or extreme frugality, or eating rice and beans for a decade. It's about something simpler, and honestly, a little more uncomfortable to look at directly. Most people aren't struggling with money. They're struggling with complexity. Too many accounts, too many obligations, too many decisions being made on autopilot by 22-year-old you, who had no idea what he was signing up for. The real problem isn't that you don't earn enough. It's that you've never made your money simple enough to see clearly. And you cannot control what you cannot see. By the end of this video, you'll understand 9 rules, not tricks, not hacks, actual structural rules, that quietly separate people who feel financially safe from people who feel financially haunted, regardless of income. Some of these will feel obvious once you hear them. The best systems always look obvious in hindsight. They just take someone saying them out loud first. Let's start with the one most people get backwards immediately. Rule 1. The one account trap. Most people think having more accounts means more control. A checking account here, 3 savings accounts for different goals, 2 credit cards for the points, maybe a buy now pay later app for the stuff that felt too expensive to buy outright. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every additional account is a place for money to hide from you. Think about a closet stuffed with clothes versus a closet with 12 carefully chosen items. Which one do you actually know the contents of? The stuffed closet feels like abundance, but you couldn't list what's in there if someone asked. The small closet, you know every single piece. Money works same way. When your financial life is spread across 8 different apps and accounts, you don't have a system, you have a scavenger hunt. And a scavenger hunt is exhausting to maintain, which means eventually you stop looking. That's when leaks start. A forgotten subscription here, an overdraft fee there. Not because you're irresponsible, but because nobody can hold 12 moving pieces in their head and still feel calm. The minimalist move isn't complicated. 1 primary checking account, 1 high-yield savings account, and at most 2 cards, 1 you actually use, 1 for emergencies. Everything else gets closed or consolidated. The mini takeaway is simple. Simplicity isn't a lifestyle aesthetic. It's a visibility strategy. You can't fix what you can't see, and you can't see what's scattered across a dozen places designed to make you feel rich while quietly making you confused. But knowing what you have is only half the equation. The other half is what happens the second you decide to spend it, and that's where most people lose the game before they even realize they're playing. Rule 2. The 24-hour filter. There's a specific moment that determines almost every financial regret you'll ever have, and it's not the moment you buy something. It's the 3 seconds right before. Picture someone scrolling late at night, tired, a little bored, and an ad appears for something that isn't a need. It's a mood, a jacket, A gadget. Something that promises to make tomorrow feel slightly different than today. The thumb hovers. There's a small window, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, where the brain is deciding between future stability and immediate relief. Almost every time, immediate relief wins because it's designed to. This isn't a willpower problem. It's a timing problem. Impulse purchases exploit the gap between wanting and thinking. Minimalist money management closes that gap on purpose. The rule is simple. Anything above a certain amount, pick a number that feels meaningful to you, maybe the cost of a nice dinner out, gets a mandatory 24-hour pause. Not because you're not allowed to buy it. Because if you still want it tomorrow, with a clear head and full context, it's probably a real want. If you don't, it was never about the object. It was about the feeling in that specific, tired, bored moment, and that feeling passes on its own. Here's what's fascinating. Most people who adopt this rule report that roughly half the things they were about to buy, they simply forget about within a day. Not because money. Because the desire was never really theirs. It was manufactured urgency, and urgency doesn't survive daylight. This single rule alone can quietly save more money over a year than an aggressive budget ever will, because it doesn't rely on discipline in the moment. It relies on a system that removes the moment entirely, and once you slow down what leaves your account, the next question becomes obvious. What if you never even saw the money you were supposed to save in the first place? Most people save whatever is left over at the end of the month. Here's the problem with that plan. There's rarely anything left over, because lifestyle always expands to devour whatever's available. This has a name: lifestyle inflation. Your spending rises quietly to match your income, and it does it so gradually you never notice the ceiling moving. A raise. Small, reasonable upgrades follow. A nicer neighborhood. A subscription that used to feel unnecessary now feels earned. None of it feels reckless in the moment. But a year later, despite earning more, the anxious feeling in the chest before checking the bank balance hasn't gone away. It's actually gotten worse, because now there's more to lose. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple, and that's exactly why most people skip it. Automate your savings the same day your income arrives, before you ever see the spendable number. Not what's left over. A fixed percentage moved automatically, invisibly, before your brain has a chance to attach itself to that money as available. This is the difference between a farmer who sets aside seed for next season before he eats, and one who eats everything now and hopes for rain. The money you never see is the money you never miss. The money that sits visible in your checking account is money your brain will find a reason to spend, guaranteed, every single time. This is also where your next raise stops being a lifestyle upgrade and starts being actual freedom. When you get a raise, increase your automatic savings percentage before you increase your spending. Let your future self get the raise first. Your present self will barely notice the difference. But 10 years from now, that gap compounds into something enormous. Once saving becomes invisible and automatic, something interesting happens. You stop thinking about money constantly, because the system is thinking about it for you. But there's a deeper trap waiting even after you've built good habits, and it has nothing to do with spending too much. It has to do with owning too much. Most financial advice is about addition. Add income, add investments, add side hustles. All useful, eventually. But almost nobody talks about subtraction first, and subtraction is usually where the fastest relief lies. Here's scenario. Someone sits down to review their monthly expenses for the first time in over a year. Really sits down, opens every statement, reads every line. They find a gym membership for a gym they haven't entered in 8 months. 3 streaming services, 2 of which they forgot existed. An app subscription that renews annually, quietly, once a year, specifically timed so it's never top of mind. Individually, small. Together, it's a second rent payment, evaporating every month for nothing. This is the psychological trap called decision fatigue combined with the sunk cost feeling. Once you're paying for something, canceling it feels like admitting a mistake, so it's easier to just keep paying and not think about it. The subscription economy is built entirely on this exact hesitation. The minimalist rule here: before adding a single new income stream or investment strategy, do a full subtraction audit. Every recurring charge gets reviewed, every 3 months, no exceptions. Anything you can't clearly justify gets cut immediately, not eventually. The mini takeaway: it's almost always easier to find $50 a month by cutting than by earning. Earning $50 extra might take hours of additional work. Cutting $50 might take 15 minutes and one cancellation email. But subtraction isn't just about subscriptions. It goes deeper than your bank statement. It goes into your actual physical life. And this is where things get genuinely interesting. Here's something almost nobody connects directly to their bank account. The more things you own, the more things you want. This sounds backwards, but think about it carefully. A person with one pair of quality shoes doesn't lie awake thinking about shoes. A person with 14 pairs is somehow still browsing for a 15th, because ownership doesn't satisfy desire, it trains it. Each purchase teaches your brain that acquisition is the solution to a feeling, so your brain keeps generating that feeling. Hungry for the next fix. There's a quiet, almost eerie kind of freedom that shows up when you own less. Fewer things to organize. Fewer things to ensure, maintain, worry about breaking. Fewer decisions every single morning because there's less to choose from. And with fewer possessions pulling at your attention, there's simply less exposure to the marketing machine constantly whispering that you need one more thing to finally feel complete. This isn't about becoming an extremist who owns 11 items and sleeps on the floor. It's about noticing that every object you bring into your life has an invisible tax attached to it. A tax paid in money, yes, but also in attention, in maintenance, in the quiet mental noise of managing more than you need. The rule: before buying anything non-essential, ask one question. Does this reduce a real problem in my life, or does it just promise a feeling? Problems are worth solving. Feelings, chased through purchases, are a treadmill that never ends, because the feeling fades within days and the bill remains for months. And this brings us to something even more dangerous than wanting things for yourself. Wanting things because of what other people might think. Let's pause here, because something needs to be said clearly before we go further. Everything discussed so far, the accounts, the pause rule, the automatic savings, the subtraction, the ownership, none of it works if you're playing a game you didn't choose. And most people, without ever realizing it, are playing exactly that game. Here's a scenario that plays out quietly in almost every neighborhood, every workplace, every friend group. Someone buys a slightly nicer car than they can comfortably afford. Not, they need it. Because a coworker, a neighbor, a cousin bought one first, and something primal in the brain registered that as a threat to status. Status spending is one of the strongest forces in human psychology, and it's almost invisible while it's happening, because it never feels like status spending. It feels like I deserve this, or I've worked hard, or this is just what people at my level drive. But strip away the justification, and what's underneath is almost always the same thing: a fear of being seen as behind. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The people you're comparing yourself to are very often financing the exact same illusion, at the exact same time, comparing themselves to someone else, in an endless chain where nobody at any level actually feels like they've made it. Visible success and real financial security are not the same thing, and they're often inversely related. The person with the loudest lifestyle is frequently the person with the least room to breathe if a single paycheck were delayed. The minimalist money person deliberately opts out of this chain, not out of superiority, out of preservation. Because financial stability requires making decisions based on your own number, your own goals, your own quiet life, not a number being set, invisibly and constantly, by people who are themselves reacting to someone else. This leads directly into something every stable person eventually discovers, usually the hard way. You cannot build security without first defining what security actually means to you. Ask most people what financially stable means to them, and you'll get a vague answer. Having enough, not stressing about money, being comfortable. None of that is actionable because none of it is a number. Vague goals produce vague behavior. Specific goals produce specific behavior. The minimalist approach cuts through this by demanding one concrete figure, your baseline number. This is the exact amount of money that needs to sit in savings before you feel structurally safe. Enough to cover 3 to 6 months of essential expenses, no more debate needed. Once that number exists on paper, something shifts psychologically. It stops being an abstract fear, what if something goes wrong, and becomes a solvable equation. I need this many more months of automatic saving to hit it. This is the difference between someone adrift in open water with no shoreline in sight, and someone swimming toward a specific point on the horizon they can actually see. Both working hard. Only one of them when to stop panicking. Once your baseline number is hit, the anxiety around money changes character entirely. It's no longer what if, because you've already built the floor that catches you. From there, and only from there, the conversation can shift toward growth, which brings us to the rule most people get impatient about and skip straight past, usually to their own detriment. Here's an uncomfortable pattern. The people most desperate for financial stability are often the ones most drawn to complicated, high-risk shortcuts, because slow, steady progress doesn't feel fast enough when you're anxious. And that anxiety gets exploited constantly by anyone selling a system that promises to skip the wait. Minimalist money management applies the same philosophy to investing that it applies to everything else. Remove complexity, remove noise, remove the constant temptation to fiddle. A small number of broad, low-cost, diversified investments, contributed to consistently and automatically, will quietly outperform most people's attempts at clever timing. Not because cleverness never works, but because consistency doesn't require you to be right every single time, and clever timing does. Consider approaches. One person checks the market daily, reacts to every dip, chases whatever's trending, and feels emotionally exhausted by the process. Another person sets up an automatic contribution once, ignores daily noise entirely, and checks in twice a year. The second person isn't smarter. They've just removed themselves as the weak link in their own plan. Boring is not the opposite of successful. Boring, sustained over years, is what successful actually looks like from the inside. It just doesn't make for an exciting story to tell at dinner, which is exactly why so few people choose it, and exactly why it works for the ones who do. Now we're close to the center of everything this video has been building toward. There's one final rule, and it isn't a technique at all. It's decision. Here's the question almost nobody asks themselves directly, because it feels uncomfortable to answer honestly. What does enough actually look like for you? Without an answer, more money will never produce stability, because there's no finish line to reach. The income keeps climbing, and the goalpost keeps climbing right alongside it, forever staying exactly out of reach. This is why you'll meet people earning extraordinary amounts who still feel financially fragile, and people earning modestly who feel completely at peace. The difference was never primarily the income. It was whether enough had ever been defined. Sit with this for a second. What would your life actually look like in specific, concrete detail if you had enough? Not more than enough. Not a fantasy version stacked with everything you've ever wanted. Just enough, stable, secure, breathing room, the ability to handle a bad month without panic. Picture it clearly. That picture is your real target. Everything beyond it is optional, and everything short of it is the actual work still ahead of you. What this looks like, starting today. Here's how to put all of this into motion, starting now, not someday. Today, consolidate down to one checking account and one savings account if you're currently scattered across several. Cancel one subscription you haven't used in the last 30 days. This week, set up an automatic transfer into savings, timed to the day your income arrives, even if it starts small. Write down your baseline number, 3 to 6 months of essential expenses, so it stops being abstract. This month, complete a full subtraction audit of every recurring charge on your statements. Cut anything you can't clearly justify. If you're not investing yet, open one simple, diversified account and automate a modest, consistent contribution. Long-term, hold on to the 24-hour rule for every non-essential purchase above your chosen threshold, permanently. Revisit your definition of enough once a year, because it will shift slightly as your life shifts, but resist the pull to let it inflate just because your income does. None of this requires talent. It requires structure. And structure, unlike willpower, doesn't get tired. Remember the two men leaving that office building. The one earning 3 times more wasn't undisciplined or foolish. He was simply playing a game with no defined finish line, spending against a version of success that kept moving the moment he got close to it. Buried under complexity, he'd built one reasonable-seeming decision at a time. The other one wasn't earning less because he lacked ambition. He'd simply done something the first man hadn't. He'd made his financial life small enough to see clearly, automatic enough to trust, and defined enough to know exactly when he could finally stop white-knuckling every paycheck. That's the whole secret, and it was never really about money at all. It was about clarity. The income was never the variable that mattered most. The complexity was, you thought this video was about minimalist money rules. It was actually about taking back a kind of quiet control that most people spend their entire lives without, chasing a number that was never going to save them, because the number was never the problem to begin with. If any part of this made you look at your own financial life a little differently, stick around, because the next video takes this even further. And before you go, what's one account, one subscription, or one habit you're going to cut this week? Write it down, you'll actually see it again. Enough was never about having more. It was about finally knowing where to stop.